What's on your radar, Ryan?
Well, as I talked about yesterday, Democratic leaders are beginning to point fingers, already blaming each other for their expected upcoming losses, with the focus squarely now on the squad. Meanwhile, the squad is likely to expand in Texas this cycle. And I'm not talking about Henry Cuellar, the Texas congressman facing an FBI investigation and a primary challenge from Justice Democrat Jessica Cisneros. She may indeed beat him, but I'm referring to Gregorio Casar, who's running in the newly drawn 35th district that represents Austin and San Antonio. The district was created to account for Austin's population explosion, and it's heavily Democratic, so whoever wins the primary will go to Congress. Now, according to a new survey by Public Policy Polling, which was paid for by the Working Families Party and Justice Democrats and provided to me yesterday, Casar is within striking distance of the 50% he needs to avoid a runoff. The poll, which surveyed 520 likely Democratic voters, was conducted February 18th to 19th. The results put Casar at 42%, shy of the 50 needed to end the primary in the first round, but well ahead of his closest competitor, Eddie Rodriguez, who sits at 13%. A third of voters in the poll remain undecided, meaning that if a quarter of those break Casar's way, he should be able to win on March 1st. Casar poll from early December put the council member up by 42-17 over Rodriguez. In the final week of the primary, WFP and Justice Democrats are launching a new ad on cable boosting Casar. Here's that.
Young, underrated, overlooked, Greg Casar. When he announced his run for city council, few took him seriously. Scrappy organizer turned fighter, became the face of progress in Austin. Now, running for Congress, he's taken seriously. Endorsed by progressive leaders like Wendy Davis, Bernie Sanders, and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And endorsed by local unions because he fights for us.
We here are the majority.
Send one of us to Congress. Greg Casar, WFP National PAC, is responsible for the content of this ad.
So if Casar comes in under 50%, a runoff will be held on May 24th, giving outside money nearly 2 months to take down the frontrunner. Casar has the backing, as the ad says, of Bernie Sanders and Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, as well as more establishment figures like former gubernatorial candidate Wendy Davis, who's a former backer of Hillary Clinton for president, and he also has the Texas AFL-CIO. Now, this is just one congressional race, so why is this interesting? Well, for one, Casar represents everything the party establishment is saying is wrong with the left wing of the party, and he's winning anyway. The son of Mexican immigrants, he was elected to the council in 2014 with a general background in activism and a specific focus on immigrant rights. He's been a controversial figure on the council, a leading progressive who successfully championed cutting the police budget and reallocating some of it to social services. He's also repeatedly clashed with the police union. An effort to overturn the defunding of the police organized by the local GOP and the police union was ultimately unsuccessful at the ballot, losing by more than 2-1. Now, another high-profile effort Casar led was ultimately rejected by voters. Casar successfully pushed for the city to lift its ban on the use of tents by homeless people in Austin. And as soon as the new law went into place, encampments sprang up across the city. A backlash ensued, and voters overturned the law, banning tents again. Casar's more moderate opponents have painted him as the poster child for Democratic excess, coming at a time of extreme self-doubt and finger-pointing among Democratic leaders. Now, Casar, a member of the Democratic Socialists of America, recently tangled with the group over his refusal to support a boycott of Israel over its ongoing and expanding occupation of Palestinian territory, and his pledge not to support cutting off U.S. military funding to the country. Casar ended up agreeing to rescind his request for the group's endorsement. The outside group, Democratic Majority for Israel, has pledged to spend big money to stop progressive candidates from winning primaries across the country. But in the wake of Casar's pledge, DMFI has not endorsed against him, which is an example of the ways big money can influence politics not only by spending, but sometimes only with the threat of the spending. Last summer, if you remember, DMFI pumped $2 million into Shontel Brown's campaign against Nina Turner, fueling a narrow come-from-behind win. And so what's fascinating here is, on the one hand, from Washington, you've got the idea that the squad is destroying us from inside. We need to return to a more moderate establishment-type politics. There's a moderate establishment Democrat, Eddie Rodriguez, served in the House for 19 years. He was kind of Travis County, I think, Democratic boss, the kind of person that would be elevated to this seat under normal times. Instead, the voters there in Austin and San Antonio are like, no, think we're going to go with the guy that
Primary
you guys hate.
voters, though, right?
Yes, but I mean, he's going to cruise.
Yeah.
He'll cruise in the general election.
Well, that's that process shields a lot of people on both sides who might be vulnerable. Otherwise, I think a history on the homeless encampments issue, the police funding issue, that's a really bad issue for Democrats.
Yeah, Republicans are probably like, go Casar.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And maybe it's the district is too gerrymandered.
They're not going to beat him, but they will use him.
Yes.
To say like, look, all of these.
Right. Do you support the Biden-Casar agenda
to
flood your neighborhood with homeless encampments? But I do think homeless encampments are a problem for people who live in a city of any size.
Austin voters agreed, and he has since said that if it winds up that they end up building a bunch of permanent housing for people as a result of this torturous situation politically that he went through, then it'll end up being a good thing in the end. But yes, I think he has publicly recognized, that didn't work. Like that's not it's you can see it from a humanitarian perspective. At the same time, it's not a long-term solution to what is becoming an unsustainable situation. Yeah,
I think Democrats are going to get hammered and then killed on crime stuff in the near future. I mean, I am extremely skeptical of the police and committed to criminal justice and libertarian. If even I am starting to be like, some of this stuff is not working that well.
Losing the libertarians.
It's not a good sign. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. So this is true. And I think what will matter the most for the future of the party is which angle he leans into. You were talking about cultural socialism, I think was the phrase.
Right. Well, not my phrase. I don't love that phrase.
But I think
what they're referring to
is an interesting phrase. Yeah. But if he has also pushed for a living wage, he has pushed for tenant rights, he has pushed for all sorts of material benefits for the working class to come from organizing on their own behalf. Then the district he represents very much wants that, and he has driven that forward.
We know that kind of stuff is popular.
So if he leans into that as a national figure, then that's a different kind of party than leaning into some of the other cultural values. Right,
which are just losers. Not just the crime stuff, but also the kind of most saccharine sort of, Me Too feminism or just BLM, just kind of saying it but not really doing anything. You keep quoting the race, stopping the big banks won't end racism. That kind of approach, which is not necessarily it's not a left approach. It's kind of I use left and progressive to kind of differentiate I know like the hardcore Bernie economic left is more motivated by these class issues, but there's a kind of progressive, the Warren constituency, which is all about.
And the irony being, of course, that they would say breaking up the banks actually does do something about racism. It doesn't end racism.
No.
But the concentration of capital extending its way through the economy the way that it currently does exacerbates racism, and we need to counteract that. That's the ultimate irony of this, is that it's like, well, okay, it wouldn't end racism, but it actually would be.
I saw a great example of this. I'm not going to be able to pull it up right now, but it was like we can't deal with the environment and climate change until we fix racism.
It's like,
No, probably should work on practical solutions that then would improve the environments in which minority people live. They have better air, they have cleaner water.
Right. If you
address racism.
If you believe in environmental justice, then actually, yes, it would help. Like even on its own terms, it falls apart.
You can't fix environmental issues until you address racism. Is a great way to stop that. All problems, everything Exxon. You want to say, funded by Exxon. Yeah. Not until you fix racism and sexism.
Exxon and Chevron would absolutely fund something like that.
Yes, and trans issues, and we're going to fix all that before we do anything.
They might have funded this video. Let's find out.
Well, our rising panel is with us next to discuss Republican Senator Rick Scott's 11-point plan for the grand old party. Very interesting stuff. Stick around for that.